Hello, and welcome to Fool's Tome, a podcast about Magic the Gathering. I'm Ty Thomason, and I am the host. This podcast is going to be an opportunity for me to have conversations with people about topics in Magic the Gathering that otherwise I wouldn't be able to share with everyone. You may have seen my blog, and I like to write about magic a lot, but sometimes the topic is more suited for a conversation than a one-sided article. I plan on covering a lot of different topics, as whatever I feel like. So you may, check in when the topic sounds interesting. Or, if something doesn't sound interesting, you can skip. This first one, we're covering Premodern. I had my friend David Gleicher on, and he's known as Grantfly on YouTube, and he's had a lot of success with his Money Mall Black deck. And we discussed that. We also discuss the success I've had with Elves in Premodern. This interview we recorded last week prior to the weekend, and so since then we've had some new results out. The Money Mall Black, or a deck very similar to that, took down the almost 300-person Spanish national tournament. So that's another feather in the cap for the brewing genius that is Grantfly. And I played a in-person Premodern event trying to win a Mox Diamond. I made the top 4 and split the prize there. So another successful outing with Elves for me. Anyway, let's get right to the interview. All right. I'm joined today with, you may know him as Grantfly, you may know him as David Gleicher. He's my first guest on the podcast. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the inaugural episode. It's an honor and a privilege.
I'm excited to get this thing started. And the reason I had you on this week, or this episode, is to talk about Premodern and just Premodern in general. What's the latest happenings? We've both been doing pretty well in Premodern, which if you had talked to us back in May at LobsterCon, I think we were kind of left that with our tail between our legs after getting kind of crushed in the main event there. But since then, it's been a lot of winning with a lot of different decks on your part. Me, it's just been one really, but. How about let's talk about how do you feel about Premodern right now?
I like it. I like the format a lot. I think it's pretty balanced. It's pretty fair. I will say, okay, I know I just said that. I've been playing a lot of rogue. I would say they could be classified as rogue strategies, which is part of the that is intentional because I'm kind of trying to play some different decks for my YouTube channel, which I kind of plug that real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
It's Grantfly on YouTube, so check that out. I play. I would classify them as like they're rogue decks, but I'm trying to make them as good as possible while acknowledging, the best decks are probably pretty much discovered, but. I think there's a lot of space to brew in kind of the tier, whatever you would call the top tier, the next level down from that. So that's kind of like a fun challenge to try and take a fringe strategy and see, or it doesn't even have to be fringe, but not one of the top 3 or 5 decks and see how good it can be. And where I was starting with this was that I think Premodern's in a good place based on my playing these decks and being able to do well with them. But I should say, in a lot of these leagues, I have not played against the very, very top decks very much. That is kind of a feature. People play all kinds of stuff, but I guess we could talk about what we think the top decks are if you want to go down that road.
Yeah,
or we don't have to.
We'll come back to that later because there's a lot to talk about on there. There's the whole idea of something about played against good decks or good players or both. But I'll dig into that later. But let's talk about some of these rogue decks you've been playing, because I think I've been really impressed at the results you put up with. The Moneyball Black deck, I think, is the one that's most notable. You won a MTGO league with that, and then made the top 8 of another one, and then 2 in-person events I think you've made the finals of. And they kind of proved to me that it's not a fluke. The first time I saw it, it's like, oh, any deck can win one of these MTGO things if it gets the right pairings, the right matchups, and has good cards. But you've really shown that you've got game against all sorts of opponents with that one.
Yeah, I think that is real. I also had one more top 16 in one of the leagues with the earliest version, and you've made the top 8 of the fall row with Elves. I've also made that with Moneyball Black, so that's one more result. I think the deck is legit, and I was personally kind of in the same boat as you. I'm like, the first time I was like, okay, I mean, this deck seems good, but anything could happen. Maybe I just got good draws or whatever. But yeah, I do think it's like a very solid, good strategy, and it I think I kind of like stumbled onto it, sort of. It's not like I set out to build this deck with all these cards in it and then did it. It was more like I was trying out different other mono black strategies and kind of like got to this by process of elimination almost. So I could get into that if you want.
Yeah, because that's kind of where it really impressed me, is that it's clear that all of these cards are not the cards you would start with if you were building the deck from scratch. I've played around the mono black space with zombies, and there's a lot of like straightforward, hey, let's play a bunch of 1-drop zombies and some lords and some dark rituals and discard spells to back it up. Or you could play like the all-in dark ritual 3-drop deck, or even the more established, kind of almost mono black control with the pit rack or the contamination locks. Those decks always kind of like have a plan, and then therefore once you have the plan, the deck card choices follow that plan. Whereas there's not really an overall plan other than, like you said, play value creatures that are efficient, or value cards that can recreate some of the stuff in the aggregate. Just a side note about the name Moneyball Black. I think it's hilarious that like I don't think it's a very good name, but I think it's a perfect name because it gets people talking about the deck, because the name just puts people's heads in a blender, and they have to spend 15 minutes on their podcast discussing whether or not it makes sense, and now they've talked about it for 15 minutes.
That's right. I wish I could say that was intentional, but I thought it was a good name. But I guess it is, but not for the reason I thought.
Yeah, so let's go over some of those card choices then, because I think some of them I think are pretty straightforward. No one's going to be surprised by seeing Duress, Cabal Therapy, Dark Ritual in a mono black deck, and then even cards like Withered Wretch and Hypnotic Spectre see a lot of play, whether that's main deck or sideboard. It's really after that where it starts to be the difference, in my opinion. So what do you think is the strong point, or the key card outside of those for the deck?
So can I answer that by like kind of describing how I got to it very briefly? I'll try and keep it brief. Like, basically, I tried out a bunch of strategies, control strategies, and aggro strategies was kind of where I approached this deck from. So kind of the standard black aggro deck has Dark Ritual, it has Sarcomancy, Carnophage, Phyrexian Negator, maybe some shadow creatures, not much removal, not many lands. And I think I had top 16 the league with a Suicide Black build that it was kind of like that, but I cut all the 1-drops because I think they're pretty bad, and they don't really let you race in Premodern. Like, Premodern is too good for those cards, generally speaking. Obviously, it can work sometimes. I'm not saying it's like never going to work, but if you're spending all your cards on those 2/2s, I feel like you're usually going to end up like you won't be able to race with them, and then your opponent will do something that's way more powerful, and you won't be able to answer it because you used your cards on 2/2s for 1. So the approach I took.
Chime in there because that was my experience playing zombies. It was in middle school where I was like, oh, the best thing is to play a bunch of these 2/2s for 1, and then I'm going to play necropotents and draw a bunch of cards. And I found that when you draw a bunch of cards and they're all just 2/2s for 1, they're not actually that good. So they're only good on like the first and second turns of the game, and only for like maybe a turn after that. So you kind of get the right call there.
They get outclassed really quickly in this format, and so I played a version that kind of eschewed those, played more heavy hitters like Lurking Evil, Phyrexian Negator, Grave Servitude, just trying to play fewer cards but more powerful cards and just compress the game down to like the bare fewest number of turns possible so that you could disrupt them, play some huge creature, throw a +3 on it and kill them hopefully before they draw out of it. And that worked okay, but that had its own consistency issues, as you could probably guess. So, and the other issue with it was Phyrexian Negator is a classic like 10 or 0 card. It might be like the best example of one of those cards ever, because just like some matchups where they don't have creatures, it's like, oh, this is a 3 mana 5/5 with no drawback, and I'll just kill my opponent in like 4 turns with it. Amazing. And in other matchups, you will literally lose the game if you draw it. It doesn't even matter if you put it into play or not, like, because against red, if you play it, obviously they'll bolt it, or they might, if they're playing goblins, they'll Gem Palm Incinerator it. You'll sack your board and you'll lose. But even if you don't play it, you can't. Those aren't matchups where you can afford to just like have a card sitting around in your hand that you can't play. You'll just die to the rest of their cards. So it's like flashier the way you lose if you play it, but you still lose equally either way.
That's the other baseball analogy. There's a baseball, the 3 true outcome type of player, which is walk, home run, or strikeout. And there's a special type of player which is just called like the home run or strikeout guy. So Adam Dunn is being like a famous example of a guy that like he strikes out way more than he ever gets a hit, but when he does, it's usually like a home run, and sometimes that's just enough to be a valuable player, but obviously it's not like the best player. But it's still something that's worth having around in the back of your mind.
Yeah. That's also really funny as a side note, because I don't really know much about baseball. When I picked this name, I'm just like, I've seen the movie. I think this is what it is. But yeah, so after trying that strategy, I was like, okay, what can I play that's like... this was kind of the next on the docket. It's like, okay, it's a mid-range, or if you want to call it mid-range or aggro control, like an aggro strategy, but it's not that aggro. I'll try playing, instead of playing a lot of 2/2s for 1s or a lot of like really heavy hitters, I'll just try and play the most generic good cards, like good in the context of the format and good in the context of if the game goes like a middle amount of time, they'll be good. That was like the general approach I was taking when I put together this version. Maybe I hadn't formulated it exactly like that, but I think subconsciously that's sort of what I was trying, and I didn't expect it to work, because it's like, well, mid-range, like those decks aren't good. This probably won't work, but whatever, I'll give it a try, because that was like the next in line for me to try in terms of what type of black deck strategy should I try. And part of the motivation behind it was, in addition to what I was talking about with the 2/2s not being that good and Negator being this 0 or 10 card, there are cards I wanted to try and play that whenever they're played against me, I'm like, why didn't I build my deck so that I could play that card? The big one is Mishra's Factory. So going back to your question of like, what is the difference card, or I forget exactly what the question was, but it's kind of like,
makes the deck.
So it's definitely an ensemble cast for sure, but Mishra's Factory is a big, it's a very prominent card in that ensemble, because it's definitely a top 10 card in Premodern, in my opinion. It's So if you play aggro decks a lot, you will know how insanely frustrating it is to see your opponent play Mishra's Factory and you like not have any way to deal with it. You're just like, oh, okay, I can't attack anymore. Like my entire strategy is brickwalled by a land. This is horrible. Um, and I was like,
Yeah,
I need to.
that's a
I,
thing coming to to some of these other aggro decks. Like a lot of them get bricked. A lot of them just it's not even so much they get bricked by it. It's just it makes playing the game that much harder. And that's one of the reasons why when we get to elves later. But like I like playing elves because you can ignore Mishra's Factory for the most part.
yeah.
You're not trying to get in chip damage. You're kind of going for one big turn, and by that
Mhm.
point the factory doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think
you can go way over the top.
that you're right. The factory. I don't know if top 10's the right thing, but it is one of the. It's definitely a pillar of the format. People still play a lot of land still or land control type decks with four factories. And when you look at the list that you have, like really, can I really say that there's any card that's better than it in the list, other than maybe duress and complete therapy? It
Yeah.
in a vacuum, it's probably the third best card.
Yeah, it's yeah. Maybe if I did an actual list, it wouldn't make the top 10. But I don't know. It's definitely up there. So there's that one. There's Curse Scroll. I guess would be the next on the list. Curse Scroll's an interesting card because it seems like it would be good in an aggro deck in a vacuum, but a lot of the aggro decks don't have a lot of lands. They don't. They want to deal damage very quickly, and Curse Scroll is like not the fastest card in the world, so it kind of lends itself very well, uh, accepting Sly to more of a mid-range strategy. I remember seeing the card in a mono white deck that was popular, like a mono white control deck. Um, can you still hear me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just thinking about
Okay.
So yeah, like I think Chris Scroll's interesting. I don't know if it's the next card I'd point to, but it is one where when I played a lot of mono black aggro in the past. I would usually play like 1 to 2 scrolls main, and I'd always want to board in to more scrolls, and it was always hard to do because I was only on like maybe 20 or 21 lands, and this is where I think we want to have the land count and dark ritual conversation here, because
Mhm.
I think that goes hand in hand with how Curse Scroll works in your deck.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you think
So
about Dark Ritual in general, and then specifically in this deck?
okay, sure. Dark Ritual in general. So in a vacuum, it's like one of the most powerful cards of all time. But usually that's in the context of enabling something incredibly broken that you're ramping out very quickly, like a Necropotence or part of a storm.
Or
Yeah, Tendrils, storm combo, that kind of thing. I mean, way back in the day when Trix was the boogeyman and like the best deck ever, or one of the best decks ever in its given format, they tried to neuter it by banning Dark Ritual and Mana Vault, and that kind of worked, but then it wasn't enough completely. But anyway, that gives you an idea of like where the card is usually at its best. So you might conclude, okay, so Dark Ritual is one of the best cards ever, but and you should always play it. But on the other hand, I can understand the argument that if you're not using it to do something that wins the game right away or very quickly, uh, if you're trying to play like a long-ish or medium range game, it's a card that doesn't make a lot of sense in theory because it's card disadvantage and you're not about to win, so the card disadvantage could catch up with you. Um, and that does make sense in theory, but this is why I think this deck is a good example of just like you have to actually try stuff and try playing because, and I'll admit, I haven't. There is probably a version you could build without it, and maybe it would be okay, but I'm skeptical, and the reason I'm skeptical is, uh, I mean, the short version of why I think Dark Ritual is important in the deck is that the format is just really powerful and pretty fast. It's not like a format where people win on the second turn usually, but they will establish a very dominating position pretty quickly. So I think you need Dark Ritual in order to be able to match the speed of the format And if you're trying to instead just play more lands and play more 1 mana cards, I don't think there's enough good 1 mana cards you could play that are good enough in like a wide enough spread of matchups to be good enough for your win percentage. So that's why I think you need to play Dark Ritual so that you can jump ahead and play and put pressure on your opponent that matches whatever they're doing. So turn one, Hypnotic Spectre is the classic example, but also like, duress into Nantuko Shade, or therapy into rats into flashback therapy, or something. Like there's a lot of different permutations of things that can be good with Dark Ritual. And one final point on that is when you're sideboarding, because even if maybe you could get away with it in game one, all the good cards, all the really heavy hitters in black cost 3 mana. So I think you want to be able to play those post board,
And
like
that's an
early.
interesting thing where after sideboard, which is probably the main strength of this deck, is it has a very strong sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I think Dark Ritual is a card that gets much worse after sideboard when people have more interaction for whatever it is you're trying to do on turn one. You're more likely to flood out when the games go longer because people are more interactive after sideboard. Here, it kind of goes the opposite, where it's almost like game one, you don't need the ritual that much because you're not doing anything crazy. But sometimes after sideboard, you want to have that turn one gloom or turn one engineer plague, or later down the line have that plague plus a discard on a key turn when you just are kind of tight on mana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You're boarding into threes, so Dark Ritual gets better. Now, I do board it out sometimes. I think there are matchups where you can board it out or board some of them out. Um, but yeah, so to go back to like the downside, which you were talking about, it's like playing an extra land or a temporary land, and if the game drags on, that can be kind of bad to draw too many of those. If you're playing 23 lands and 4 Dark Rituals, that can be a lot of mana, a lot of potentially dead draws. So the way the deck kind of evolved was to play as many cards as I thought I could fit into the deck that would sort of mitigate the downside of drawing Dark Ritual later on. And it doesn't always work, but I think it works well enough overall to be worth playing them. So we could go through the cards, but just briefly, you've got Mishra's Factory, you've got Curse Scroll. We already mentioned those. There's
One more note on that Curse Scroll is that there is like a pretty good synergy with Curse Scroll and Dark Ritual when maybe you want to have 24, 25 lands in your deck, but sometimes if you have Curse Scroll and you just keep drawing lands, you never get quite low enough to be able to reliably
yeah,
use it. But Dark Ritual lets you really empty your hand and really control that kind of Curse Scroll late game. Um, and
that's true. Yeah, it
unless you
gives you a lot of
activate it, it
control.
might not appear you can. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a lot, exactly. It gives you a lot of control over being able to activate Scroll if you need to, which is pretty important because it's not the kind of card where it's okay if it can't activate it right now. Like if you're relying on it to kill their creatures, you really need to be able to do it when you need to, which is kind of the driving principle behind the deck. It's like these cards aren't that powerful in a vacuum, so you really need to be able to play them when you can and play them consistently. So yeah, the other cards in this might not seem like it fits, but I think Hypnotic Spectre also is a card that makes Dark Ritual less bad in the sense that okay, you might draw a dead card, but you got rid of like two of their cards, so you're kind of even in that respect.
But yeah, and also Hypnotic Spectre, while generally a fine card, it's so much better on turn one than it is on turn three, and
Yeah,
that's if you didn't have Dark Ritual, then you might not play Spectre, and now you start moving in a completely different direction as your deck, and it's like
yes,
you kind of lose that. Not so much like a free win, but like sometimes it's a good enough play turn one to dictate the pace of the game and put them on the back foot instead of you being solely reactive.
yes. I will say it definitely is a free win sometimes against some matchups. Like not all the time, obviously, but it qualifies.
I think
But
there's
yes, I agree.
interest matchups where if you get that turn one and they don't have a good way to stop it, it just locks them out. Yeah.
Mhm. But yeah, I agree. It is way, way better turn one. And yeah, if you weren't playing it, you might want to go in a different direction. So there's Hypnotic Spectre, there's Curse Scroll, Mishra's Factory, Spawning Pool, honorable mention, and Nantuko Shade. So all those and Withered Wretch. Sorry. So all those cards were kind of like it's not so much that I put them in order to make Dark Ritual better, but they synergize well
Mhm.
with like mitigating the drawback of Dark Ritual later. Um,
Yeah, and on Withered Wretch, because I think that's a good card to talk about now, is that when I watched your videos of the league, and it was just so often you would draw Withered Wretch, and it would kind of just control the game, whether it was keeping a Terravore under control, or stopping a Hermit Druid, or just being a 2/2 against an Elf deck while you keep them from using survival optimally. It does so much, and people kind of question, well, do you really need four main deck? And it's really like, why wouldn't you play four if it does this much and it's that efficient as an attacker?
yeah, and everything people are saying about the deck, like I thought the exact same thing when I started playing it or like building it. I didn't have four Withered Wretch at the beginning because I was like, well, sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it won't. I'll play a few, and then I'll play like a Skittering Scourge and one a Negator, and the more I played, the more I just concluded like, no, I should just play for Wretch.
Mm-hmm.
Like these other cards aren't worth the like they're not that much better, and the upside when you have Wretch is just insane.
Yeah.
Well, it ranges from like okay, it's a grizzly bear to it wins the matchup like on its own if they don't get rid of it. Um, and I will admit I played against a lot of Terravore decks
Mm-hmm.
uh, at the beginning, and that was it. Like Terravore decks and blue control decks are kind of this deck's best matchups, I think. So I was probably winning a lot because I happened to play against those decks a lot. And those are ones where well, especially Terravore, but even against control, like if they use accumulated knowledge, all right, it's the difference between drawing
Yeah.
two versus that card just cycling is huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the last key card of the main deck, and this is the card that I thought I would have picked right after Mishra's Factory as being the key to the deck, and that's Ravenous Rats. And
Mm.
it's nothing new in pre-modern. People have been playing this card in some of that black-red Lava-Born Muse deck, but you've kind of decided that you don't need cards like the Rack or Lava-Born Muse to make it good. That it's just good enough on its own with even just only three Cabal therapies. You're not even on the full four Cabal therapies. So, talk to me about Ravenous Rats, and it sounds like maybe you're not as high on it in this list as I am, but like it's a necessary evil in your mind.
Yeah, well, I do have the fourth therapy in the board, and it's certain like if there's any change to make to the deck that I would be not critical of, it would be if somebody decided to just play for therapy main. I definitely wouldn't fault them for that because it is one of the like best discard spells ever, and I do board it in a lot. But yeah, actually, okay. So this kind of goes back to comparing this deck to like your traditional black aggro deck. So hopefully this is an okay detour for me to be taking here. The traditional black aggro deck that doesn't play Ravenous Rats usually because it isn't a very powerful attacker, and sometimes they play therapy, sometimes they don't. But therapy isn't very good in those decks because there's nothing good to sacrifice to flash it back. Like you do not want to use your Sarcomancy token to like flashback at Cabal Therapy. That's quite miserable. It's not really a winning play. So, but at the same time, those aggro decks aren't really powerful enough to beat what the opponent's doing straight up, or like if they are one duress, like that's usually not enough. So they kind of need a supplemental discard spell,
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't a good one except Cabal Therapy. And I try. So when I was building this deck, I was like, I didn't really even consider rats. I think maybe I had like one. I don't remember what I had in the initial version. No, I don't think I had any. And I was trying to play blackmail instead of
Okay.
Cabal Therapy because I thought like, okay, I can't play Cabal Therapy because I don't have any good creatures to sacrifice to it. So I'll play blackmail and that'll be fine. It wasn't fine. It's that card is not quite good enough because there's just certain cards in pre-modern that are way more powerful than the other 3 cards that they could show you. So the evolution of the deck was like, okay, I think I had 1 therapy. I was like, okay, I gotta add some more therapies. It's just, I need something, but I don't want to play cards. I don't want to just sacrifice a regular creature that has gained me no value to flashback therapy. So what can I play? Okay, the 3 mana slot, like I said before, is jam packed with good cards. So I would prefer if whatever I played was like cheaper than that. So what can I play? What can I play that does something? And it turns out Ravenous Rats is the only, like literally the only creature that's good that you can play.
So, another card that I think this deck is really good with at flashing back therapy is go back to those Mishra's Factories, and then it's a, almost a free creature, like a Mimnite, if you will, at flashing back therapy, and that can be, that's the difference in a lot of games, is just having that extra creature around to get that flashback in. So, it looks like you only have 16 creatures, but you also have those 5-man lands, and so that makes it more than enough for the therapies. And then, that's a good way to utilize that.
Yeah, that's another one of the like synergies of the deck that I didn't fully realize until I kind of started playing. It's like, oh, I have like therapy is insane in this deck because you have rats to flash it back and you have Mishra's Factory, so you just have a lot of ways to do it, which is
times, as good as we said Factory is at stopping your opponent, there's a lot of times where your opponents are just stopping your factories from doing anything as well, and if you can get some value out of them, flashback therapy while you still have your black mana up to pump an Nantuko Shade, that's key.
Yeah, I mean, if you basically, therapy might be good at attacking, but sometimes taking their card is better, and you have the option to do that. And it's like, if you had a swamp that you could sacrifice to flashback about therapy, that would be a really powerful swamp. Well, you do. It's called Mishra's Factory. It doesn't make black mana, but it gives you that option.
All right. Well, as far as the rest of the deck goes, the big things in the sideboard, you got those 4 plagues, a couple of Loom, couple of Dystopia. I think you've played some Perish before. Really, what I want to talk about is kind of your overall strategy with a lot of these one-ofs. Your main deck has that 1 Graveborn Muse, that 1 Phyrexian Arena, the 1 Spinning Darkness and Snuff Out, and then the sideboard you play like 1 Tormod's Crypt and 1 Drain Life. What are you thinking with these one-ofs, and what is your kind of philosophy behind all of that?
Sure. Before we get to that, can I talk about Nantuko Shade real quick? Since we've addressed most of the other main cards.
I think I understand how good Nantuko Shade is because it wins the game so much faster than it otherwise looks. You have an Nantuko Shade with 3 swamps in play, and you attack, they can't block. You just let them take 2, and you play another Nantuko Shade, and now they're in a real tough spot where they can't really attack or block because you have 2 shades going. And it's the one card I think I would try to put a 4th one in. But do you have anything else to add there?
No, I mean, I'm glad you agree. I think there are a lot of people who have some shade to throw at Nantuko Shade. So, pun intended. So, basically, that card is functioning as the version of Phyrexian Negator that won't cause you to lose to an entire color.
And it's also
red,
kind of functioning like Drain Life or Corrupt and letting you turn all of your extra mana into damage, but it's letting you do it every single turn. And a lot of times you could get in spots with zombies or even with some mid-range stuff where you have like a Withered Wretch and Hypnotic Spectre going and they have no graveyard, no hand, but you still can lose to whatever it is they draw. And if you have an Nantuko Shade instead, they only get 2 draw steps before they're dead, or they might draw something and by that point they're low enough on life that you can just swarm them, and nothing else in the deck really kind of does that. So that is certainly kind of like all of these cards, like you're right, the one aspect of the money ball where you're trying to rebuild something in the aggregate is all of these creatures kind of trying to rebuild more or less like a planeswalker in aggregate. You've got your like Hypnotic Spectre doing the Lily on the Veil thing, you've got your Withered Wretch exiling graveyards and just card advantage from the Ravenous Rats, and then the Nantuko Shade is kind of like your ultimate. So it takes, but you don't need to draw all of them together for it to come together. Each one gets enough value that you do get closer and closer to winning.
Yeah, exactly. The Shade is like it's not quite as good as Negator in the mid game, but then it becomes even better later on when you have all the extra mana pump into it. And the fact is, like, usually combined with all your other stuff, you don't need it to be as fast as a Phyrexian Negator. Like, if you give your opponent one extra turn, it's usually not going to matter because they'll still die because you've played other disruptive cards and stuff like that. It's usually not just like a pure race. Um, yeah. So anyway, just wanted to cover the shade. So you're asking about the one ofs and the philosophy. Basically, my philosophy is that on deck building in general is that you want the cards in your deck to fulfill a certain role so that you can have the game play out the way that you want in order to be able to win the matchup. So I have no allegiance whatsoever to playing 1, 2, 3, 4 copies of a card. Like I do not care at all. There's no. It's like whatever is right for the deck to function how you want is the right number. So I don't even really view it as one ofs. I just view it as like, okay, how many of this effect do I want and when do I want it? And an example would be Torment Script. There's one Torment Script in the sideboard, but there's 4 Withered Wretch in the main deck. So really there's like 5 of that effect. And that's how many of the effect I felt like I should have. Like how many would be a good number to have. Like the 4 Wretch are pretty solid. They take care of a lot of it. But in some matchups, you want a little bit of extra juice against the graveyard. So what should I do? Well, I'm already playing 4 Withered Wretch, so how about 1 Torment Script? Like that's the like 5th weird version of Withered Wretch that I'm playing. Spawning Pool is kind of the same sort of thing. Like, okay, I can't play 5 factories, so but I want one. I don't even care if it's a lot worse than the 4th factory. I just want another one that's even like 40% as good. So
I think
I'll play a Spawning Pool.
Selection of your removal as well. You get the 3 Smothers, but then you have the 1 Snuff Out, 1 Edict, and 1 Splitting Darkness, which, in some of the aggro matchups, they're all about the same, more or less, but in specific situations, you really would rather have a Snuff Out or a Diabolic Edict or a Spitting Darkness than that.
The Diabolic Edict especially is an example of like trying to make your sideboard larger virtually, because like you said, a lot of the time the removal spell will function the same way, but sometimes you'll play against Enchantress and none of your removal will do anything except if you play a Diabolic Edict, then it actually can do something against that deck. So it's like you can kind of like work that in because like in the aggregate the removal will do what it's supposed to do, and then you get like an extra quote unquote free spot. I'm less sure about the Spitting Darkness. I'm not totally convinced that's even worth it, but it's been okay. Meddling Mage is another like semi reason to play some of the split, and then Snuff Out is in a vacuum the best of all the removal, but it also costs you 4 life, so you can't play that many of them, in my opinion. So that's kind of the restricting factor there. What other one ofs were we?
Well,
we're talking about
like the Drain Life. I think is the one that
the Drain Life.
We've
made
fun of you in Discord about.
The Drain Life. So the Drain Life, that's another card where if somebody wants to get rid of it, I won't be super mad about it. I won't fault you for it. Essentially, the idea behind it is like, I wanted one more good card against the Sly matchup, and that is one of them. I don't think it's particularly that much worse than anything else you could play, and sometimes you can board it in other matchups where you might like. There's a lot of matchups where your removal is just bad, so you want to bring in something. So it's a card that you can like always board in if you really have nothing better, and it can do something. That's kind of the philosophy behind it. But I also think it's not really worse against Sly than anything else. I mean, Vicious Hunger is a sorcery.
It's one of those cards where, personally, this is not how I like to sideboard. It's one of those nice to have, not like great matchup swinging type cards. There's a classic card I used to troll Will Lowry, a good friend, with when we were designing decks. This was, I think, in Theros standard. Bow of Nylea. Do you remember that card? I think it's
Kind of.
1 green for an artifact enchantment, and you can pay like 2 mana and tap it. Let me look it up because it does so much. And
It like puts a counter on something, or kills a flyer, or damages a flyer or something.
yeah, it does all of this. So you can tap 2 to put a counter on a creature, or to do 2 damage to a creature with flying, or to gain 3 life, or to put cards from your graveyard on the bottom of your library in any order. So like, it's like, oh, you can put this. If you have something that's a bad matchup, like one of those abilities is going to be good in the matchup. So you can put this in your wing. And so anytime he would ask for a sideboard card for a certain thing, I was like, oh, you could. You're losing to the mill. How about we put Bow of Nylea in there? They can't mill us out anymore. Or you're losing to, damage on your creatures. Let's just put a bunch of counters on it with Bow of Nylea. And they have flying. Let's start shocking it, or just gain 3 life every turn. And it's clearly never going to be worth spending 5 mana just for that first effect. And but it was a good joke, and that's kind of how I see a card like Drain Life. Even though Drain Life has a lot more upside because it isn't as awkward and clunky, but it is that kind of. It does a lot of nothing, but maybe does enough. Because there's been cards like that have been good. I think I always remember some type of, what was it called? Satchel? There was like a Satchel card in one of the core sets.
Druidic Satchel, I think.
Yeah, Druidic Satchel, and I remember that card was playable in Standard, and I think Reed Duke did a lot with that back then. So sometimes, that one's a little different because I think it's more like a draw a card every turn type of card than a do a little bit of nothing every turn. But there's a small difference between drawing a card and doing nothing, on the margins.
And I will say I do generally agree with what you're saying. Like, you want your cyber cards to be more targeted and powerful, but I think, like you were saying about the strength of the sideboard cards in black, because the rest of them are so good, I think I can get away with one, like Drain Life.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how I'm justifying it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that covers the deck tech really, and so like we said, you've done pretty well in the 2 online leagues that you've top 16 with, or 3 of them, I think, and then you won one of those, and then you won a real life in-person event and made the finals of another one, and now you're in the top 8 of the fall brawl. So, good job. I think you've proven this deck has legs, and I might try and play it at some point. I don't know when or where or why, but it's interesting, and I like a lot of the cards there. So
yeah, give it a shot. It's fun.
Yeah,
Cabal Therapy is a fun card.
So let's move on and talk more about some of your other stuff. I know some of your other decks from your YouTube aren't quite as tuned, aren't quite as tournament ready, but you still seem to put up some success and impress me with just how well some of these cards perform. I think specifically the Naya BirdBombment deck that you played, the most recent one, but has it surprised you as much as it surprises me that you do well with these, or are you kind of expecting it? Because I think there was another one that you did well with, like the White Lightning deck that did better than I thought it would ever do.
Yeah, that one, the White Lightning one and the BirdBombment deck are kind of pretty similar in the sense that they are trying to play evasive creatures and an anthem effect and just attack. And I was a little bit surprised at how well that strategy worked. Again, I think some of it has to do with the fact that in these leagues, people are not necessarily playing. I mean, they are playing good decks, but they're not. It's not like a LobsterCon where I feel like everybody in the room, or most everybody in the room, was like trying to play one of the very top decks in the format. So against kind of like random stuff, which is not to say that it's bad, but it's not like the top tier. Just beating down with like very aggressive and evasive creatures can be very good. And maybe it would be, I do think it's like a fine strategy against like, you can always win, obviously, if your opponent doesn't have a great hand and you just have a fast clock and maybe a disenchant or a Swords of Plowshares, you can win.
I think
but yeah,
these white aggro decks that you've played, like this one, the White Lightning, or even going back to LobsterCon when you were playing actual White Weenie, it's that like they're kind of very different from the typical pre-modern deck in that they don't have like one really good card that the whole deck's built around, and then a bunch of cards that are like kind of filling the void. They kind of all have like the same flat power level, and that actually can catch
Mm-hmm.
people by surprise if they're not prepared to fight like a normal or a more modern take on how power level in a deck functions.
Yeah, that could be. I think the idea, at least behind some of them, is to try and uh, focus on making certain cards or strategies as good as they can be. If maybe I think they've been a little underexplored or what, not even underexplored, but just to for try personally to see what I can do. So for the bombardment deck, for example, you got Goblin Bombardment, which I think is a pretty powerful card that is not quite amazing in the pre-modern format specifically, but it's like a very powerful effect in the abstract. And Battle Screech, which again is like a pretty good card that is just maybe a little bit too slow in general, or it's hard to support it properly in pre-modern. Um, and so I was just trying to make those cards as good as I could get them to be. And yeah, I've tried for that deck. I tried a few practice matches where I was playing like Soul Catcher's area in the deck to try and like go off, and that was not really. It wasn't really consistent enough. You don't have enough enablers to make that happen.
Okay, that was a card
So, in my opinion,
that I think would have a home here because he can go pretty big pretty fast. In fact, the other night, I was playing Commander at the local store, which I'll talk about that in some future episode. And my opponent did have Soulcatcher's Airy in play and some type of bird that whenever it damaged you, he just kept finding more copies of the same bird. And eventually, it was like you kept killing these birds, but they kept getting bigger and bigger, and eventually we all died. So
that's a classic card that does seem like way better in Commander than it would be in like a 60 card one-on-one format. But you could try playing some. I think maybe it could work, but I don't know. Those are the types of cards that I don't really like to play unless I'm sure you can build a deck to support it. And there's really no good sacrifice outlet besides Goblin Bombardment in those colors,
yeah.
fortunately.
You know me, I love a good tribal aggro deck, and I've played Shared Triumph in pre-modern several occasions. Most recently in some Slivers brews, and so I like seeing that you're playing Shared Triumph here. I do think, maybe is it possible that you'd want to stretch the mana out even more and try and play like Lightning Bolt in this deck, or do you think it should stay mostly white focused?
Well, I think it should probably stay mostly white focus because, for example, I'm only playing like 3 swords in the main. I have the 4th in the board. So Swords to Plowshares gives you, that's a pretty good removal spell. So
Yeah, that's what I mean was like when I played the sliver deck, the strength of the deck wasn't so much that I had a bunch of good slivers. It was Naya slivers, right? You don't even have any good slivers in those colors other than muscle sliver. But it was more of the fact that I had 4 bolt and 4 swords to kind of give me game against anything, and then it doesn't matter what your other creatures are. And the slivers were efficient enough. And now the birds, I think, are actually a little bit more efficient because they cost 1 and 2 instead of 2 and 3. So I don't know if that's. That's something I would think about. I don't know how
yeah,
how strong
you could probably
Paradise. I
you could probably
even need the green mana in this deck.
yeah, you could probably squeeze a couple of lightning bolts. As for Birds of Paradise, yeah, it was. The deck is very weird looking because you're basically splashing for Birds of Paradise, and that's kind of odd. But it actually, I think, is a pretty good card to play because it's the only other bird besides Suntailhawk that costs 1 mana, and B, it helps you fix your 3rd color, which is red. So like I had games where I needed the fixing from birds to get to the 3rd color, and it also helps you. There's a lot of 2-drop birds, and there's Battle Screech, so it helps you either play 2/2 drops, play a 2-drop and a 1-drop, or play Battle Screech, earlier. And it's a bird, so it can get pumped by Shared Triumph, so it's not like totally dead. later on in the game. So the bird, I was actually pretty impressed by how good Birds of Paradise was in the bird tribal deck.
That's good to know. So, we'll check in on that after you finish your league, and maybe you'll win that one, and you'll have a new deck that everyone's going to talk about.
I have already made it to the top eight. I had a crazy match against Fran playing Bant Alurin, and I'll probably try and put that video out.
That sounds
It
crazy.
was
Yeah.
very exciting 3 game match.
All right. So, yeah, let's turn back to. Do you have anything you want to talk about the Fall Brawl? I know we've mentioned that you're in the top 8 of that. You think you went 7-1. You played Moneyball Black. Before we move on to talk about my experience in the Fall Brawl, any cool stories from the Fall Brawl?
Uh, nothing like that. No, not really. Nothing that
Yeah,
interesting.
no, I would say it hasn't been that super memorable for me either. But
I mean, the games were fun, but there's nothing like super crazy that happened in any of them.
things just going to plan really. What was your one loss?
I lost to classic full English breakfast. I did flood out a bit in the third game, which again is a risk of playing 23 lands and 4 dark rituals. So I think that's like, well, it's actually probably one of the harder graveyard based matchups because they can set up their win in such a way where you can't really disrupt it with graveyard hate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it
so that's the
has a
hardest
lot of
one for
options
sure.
at their disposal to beat a Withered Wretch.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, so I'm also in the Fall Brawl and in the top 8. I went 8-0 with Elves, and so I may.
Yeah, let's talk about your insane record with elves.
Yeah, let's talk about Elves. Um, Elves, I think. I don't know if it's the best deck in the format. It's clearly one of the 3 best decks in the format. Um, and the reason I think it's that way is I think it's hard for there to be, just pre-modern in general. I don't think it just formats in general. I think it's really hard for there to be more than 3 top decks. Like usually it should condense down to some rock paper scissors among the top 3. Maybe room for a fourth
Mhm.
one that can kind of sneak in there. But what I think about Elves, and this is similar to what I think about Time Vault in pre or in old school, it gives you the best odds of beating just kind of the average or random player in the room. And so what I mean by that is not everyone's going to show up with a tier 1 deck that they've tested a lot of. Not everyone is the strongest or most capable players in just in terms of experience. Both you and I, we've played multiple pro tours. We're the top of the top as far as pre-modern players go, as far as experience on that level. So that you play against somebody that doesn't have that. I would say playing Elves or playing Time Vault in old school, it's almost like you're 100% to win in some of these matchups
Mm.
where like it's really 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 hard to lose, as long as you don't do anything to beat yourself. And um, I think the elf deck doesn't lose to itself as much as say like a dreadnought deck does. Dreadnought
Mhm.
has to draw dreadnought to win in the first game,
Yeah.
and it has the tools to do that. It does it more often than not, but I've seen too many times and too many players that are, you know, very good players just kind of never find the dreadnought, and that's not a place I want to be. And the other best deck, whether that's some type of control deck, combo deck, replenish, some type of parallax wave, opalescence deck, um, those decks really kind of rely on having a good critical mass of cards to start their engines going, and they don't mulligan as well as say an elf deck does, where an elf deck can mulligan to 4 and still have like a turn 4 kill if it has a survival going. So that's kind of how I feel about it now that I've actually done the math, because like you said, I have a pretty insane record with elves since I picked it up in the fall of last year. What did we say? It was like 48-6. No, 46-8 over some. It was like 2 online webcam leagues, LobsterCon, a couple of online Premodern leagues, and a couple of in-person events. So that's higher than like I think any deck I've ever played. Even when I was playing Cobblade Mirrors all day, like you could only get so much of an edge there, and back then you actually had to play against some of the best of the best on Magic Online. So I think Elves is really good, and the reason I think it's good, well, I mean, what else do you want to ask me about it? Because that's my main thesis on it.
Yeah, I do have a question. So you're saying it gives you a lot of agency. How does that square with facing off against sideboard cards? And this is something I want to know for my own personal interest,
Mm-hmm.
trying to beat elves. But like, how bad is it if somebody just decides to pack for Engineered Plague, or they're playing Volcanic Spray, or whatever? Like, how good are those cards, or a bunch of lava darts, or whatever you want to say, whatever the good cards are against you? Like, what are they? How hard are they to beat, and how much have you encountered something like that where someone just has a ton of cards against you?
I would say I've never played against anybody that's got like that's bringing in 12 plus cards or anything like that. I've seen people bring in probably 6 to 8 cards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
some of those cards,
Which is a lot.
which is
That
a
would
lot,
be a lot.
yes, but like these are cards that are generally good in other matchups as well. They're not specifically for elves, right? So like any removal is going to be good. Um, but it really starts to get fuzzy. Is like how much do they want to try and stop you from using survival? So you see a lot of like Phyrexian Furnaces after sideboard, which, yeah, they brought in their Phyrexian Furnaces because it's good against you. It doesn't really cost them a lot, but that's not like you're playing against a hate card, right? Like that card's pretty easy to
Right.
beat. You play against Engineer Plagues, and to be honest, I don't find Plague that hard to beat if you have survival going. I think it's almost trivial to beat if you have survival going, and even without survival, there's enough play that you can have that I don't find it to be that terrifying. I finally come to the plan I like against Engineer Plague, which is just to play a bunch of Nantuko Vigilantes. They can't ever
Mm-hmm.
name face down creatures because they don't have types, so it's always going to be able to kill the first one if you can unmorph it. And once you kill the first one, there should be a chain reaction of killing the additional ones. If God forbid they somehow have 2 or more in play. So a lot of times you play Wirewood Symbiote and an elf, and they play that first Engineer Plague, and you pick up your elf, and then they have to decide, do I have to kill this Wirewood Symbiote now, or do I have to name elves and slow you down? And I don't know what the right answer is for my opponents because I've seen them do both, and I've beat them both ways. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I've tried lots of different ways to beat Engineer Plague, and I think they all work. That's the thing about beating Engineer Plague is like almost any way you come up with to beat Engineer Plague, I think works. I know some people like to play Elvish Champions. I think that one's probably a little sketchier than some of the others, but I played Call of the Herd, played Phantom Nantukos. That deck was interesting, and that was fine against Engineer Plague. So Plague itself isn't that big of a problem, and then sweepers, I don't find to be that big of a problem either because you can generally tell when one's coming, right? Like especially against decks that could play Plague or Perish, right? Or they could play Plague
Mm-hmm.
or Pyroclasm or something like that, or Pyrokinesis, like from Goblins. So it's like if they don't have Plague, they probably have a sweeper, and you can set up to recover from a sweeper pretty easily. It's only if they can back it up with a clock. So you need to have. And this is where I think the volcanic spray out of the Terravor deck. That's the scary card, and that's kind of why in this recent thing I've tried to mitigate that with like more Rishad imports and just a higher land count in general because you're probably going to lose your early mana guys, and that's you just have to assume that you're not going to have your turn 1 elf live, and that's my philosophy on that.
You're going like a little bit of cradle control, just a tiny bit. You're 5% cradle control,
Yeah, I mean,
95%
I think
elves.
I don't know if it's cradle control or it's just like, hey, I'm putting a reasonable amount of lands in my deck. I'm not all in
Uh-huh.
on tapping my creatures for mana and getting blown out by a wrath. So I've seen lists. Just today, somebody shared a list in the Elf Discord that was 17 lands, and I'm playing 21, and like that
Yeah.
that's just like such a huge gap to be. And like I haven't I played 21 I think I played 20 or 21 the whole time I've played Elves, and I've never felt like I needed fewer lands. You know, like there's plenty of games where it's like I just need to draw any land, and I'm good. So I don't know how people get away with it with 17. You know, finding out what those extra 2 lands are. Like I'm playing 2 Rashad imports, and I think they're pretty good. But you know, they could just be more forests. You know, and just enable those turn 1 stuff faster. Um, so
Treetop Village.
I don't think it's Treetop Village.
I think we're on the same page about tending to want more lands than is typical in the deck, in a given deck. But yeah, that's good to know that these sideboard cards by themselves are not enough. Like you really need to be oriented towards having more disruption and a clock plus some kind of hateful sideboard cards in order to beat the deck, which
against like mono black decks in general, you play against a lot of them online, and it's like, hey, they've got an engineer plague out, they've got a powder keg in play, and they've got a Phyrexian furnace, and it's like, okay, but like they're not doing anything, so it's just draw go until you find your first answer, and like, hey, if your first answer kills the furnace, all right, hey, now we can start using survival. If your first answer kills the powder keg, it's like, okay, maybe now we try and do some wirewood symbiote stuff and see how we can generate value with that. Or maybe you kill the plague first, and it's like, okay, we'll just play a bunch of elves, force them to pop the keg, and now they're down all their cards because they haven't done anything. So, yeah, there's a lot of that, and then you got to have the clock to back up the hate. That's the key.
And not to go back to the Moneyball Black deck, but this is what you described there is exactly why I don't love playing a lot of those cards and taking that approach, at least in a black deck, because like you said, you need to be proactive against a lot of these strategies, because ultimately the strategies are more powerful than like a lot of the cards that you might be playing. So you need to kill them before they draw that survival and just go nuts with it.
Yeah. So, you know, on the note, so I have a 1K that I'm playing this Sunday, and I'm most likely going to play Elves. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't, though. What are your thoughts on some of the cards that you've seen in my Elf deck, and if you think there's some questions you have, and I'll try and defend them here, both to you and to myself, so I know what's going on.
All right, let me pull up the most recent list. Is this weird triangular picture? Is that it?
Yeah,
is that the most recent one?
Out of Japan apparently is doing these.
Is this your deck or is this somebody else's picture?
My deck, yeah, but the Japanese guys started doing their deck photos like that, and
I can't say I'm a huge fan of it, but it does look different. I'll give it that.
It looks cool the first time you see it, and I would say it doesn't.
It's hard to
the best job of communicating what's in the list.
That's my main issue with it. Yeah.
But then
this bottom row is the sideboard. Is that right?
Yes, the bottom row is the sideboard. Yeah. But I think the other thing about it is that it's actually really hard to set up your cards to do that. Like I was like, oh, I'll do this. I'll try it out. And I was like, oh, this is actually not straightforward to do. I do like that it's compact and doesn't take up a ton of space, so it's easier to get the photo. But otherwise, I would not recommend using that format for deck photos.
I will not be doing that. I can't even put like 4 cards in a straight line, so it's not an issue for me. Okay, so this list, I'm looking at it. We got 21 lands, you said.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest Elves expert in the world, to put it mildly, so I don't really know. I mean, there's nothing that jumps out at me in this list that looks bad. I like all these cards. I like Thornscape Battle Mage. I like Tribal Force Mage. 2 Hermits, right? That seems good. Seems like a good number.
Yeah, let me talk about the main deck, because I think the main deck is pretty much locked except for like 3 flex slots. So I think 21 lands, I'm going to play that. I'm going to play 8 mana elves, 4 priests, 4 symbiote, 4 Multani's Acolyte, 4 survivals. I think you have to play 2 deranged hermits, the Yavimai Granger, the Squee, and the Anger. And I think you need to have the Nantuko Vigilante, the Masticore, and I think you want at least 3 Quirion Rangers in the main. And so that really leaves the Sky Shroud Poacher, Tribal Force Mage, Wall of Roots, Collar the Claw, and Thornscape Battle Mage. So that's like 5 cards that could be other things. And I like the Wall of Roots instead of that 4th Quirion Ranger because there are times where you don't have the land drops to spend on your Quirion Ranger, but you still want to have that extra mana over the next few turns. Or even just instead of getting a Llanowar Elves, you want to get that Quirion or that Wall of Roots and kind of use survival multiple turns. The Tribal Force Mage, you have to play something like that in the main deck, whether it's Tribal Force Mage or Kamal, or some people say you could just play a 3rd Deranged Hermit. I think Tribal Force Mage does enough sometimes when you draw it that I like it. And then it's slightly cheaper. It's usually 1 mana cheaper than getting another Hermit or a Kamal, I think. So it's the one I go with, but it's not a mandatory one by any means.
I don't know. I really like this main deck. I am always a fan of playing more creatures rather than less
Yes.
in your survival deck. So I know there's versions that play like Biorhythm or Tanglewire and stuff.
Right.
I don't know how good those are, but in the abstract, I really like playing as many creatures
I
as
don't like
possible.
playing 9 creatures in this deck. I play Tanglewire at LobsterCon. I think it's good. I don't think you play against the decks that it's great against enough to warrant playing it in the main, and I don't think it's quite strong enough to be a sideboard. So like there are matchups where Tanglewire makes your deck, you go from like a 60%, 70% win to like 90%, because if you just draw Tanglewire, they're so far behind. But I don't know if that's what you need to be doing with this deck.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a worthwhile thing to try and get a 65% matchup to 90 or whatever.
Yeah, maybe it's like a 50%. You're turning 50% into like a 75%, which is good, but is it worth? Because you kind of have to play all 4 Tanglewires to make them good.
Right.
Yeah, because they're so good in multiples. So really, we're down to like the last 3 spots, being that Thornscape, that Collar the Claw, and that Skyshroud Poacher. And I think of those, the one that is most locked is the Skyshroud Poacher. This is something
Really?
I learned from
Not Thornscape? I thought you loved Thornscape Battle Mage.
Thornscape. I love it a lot more in middle school, where you put damage on the stack because it
okay.
stuff there. So in Premodern, I haven't found it to be as quite like board controlling. Like Thornscape is like better than Mastercore sometimes in middle school, whereas and I think I would, if I was playing it in middle school, I would play another red source, probably a Birchlord Rangers, just to support how good that Thornscape symbiote lock is. But in Premodern, I don't think it comes up enough in my games that I don't think.
You can't make white, can you?
I cannot make white, so haven't really felt the need to make white. But it's Birchlord Rangers is probably like next on the list of cards that would make the main deck if I cut one of these 3 cards that I'll talk about. So the Poacher, though, I learned when I was playing the Phantom Nantuko version that a lot of times the opponent's plan when you resolve a survival is to let you resolve that survival and you go get Squee, and then they disenchant it, right? Or they naturalize it. And now you've just basically spent 3 mana to go put a Squee into your hand that doesn't do anything if you don't have another survival. And I found that it wasn't that hard to see when that was coming. And in those spots, I would just go grab Phantom Nantuko, and then they would blow up my survival. I'd play Phantom Nantuko. I'd untap it a couple times with Wyred Symbiote and Quirion Ranger, and then they would die. And it's like, well, okay, so you want something that you can search for with survival. Like if you play survival with 1 mana up, you want to be able to get something right away that's going to keep you moving the game forward in your direction, if they have the answer for survival. And I think the best card for that is Skyshroud Poacher, because if they have an answer for the survival, they might not have an answer for creature, and so they kill your survival, you play the Poacher, and now you're just churning out Deranged Hermits or Multani's Acolytes or whatever it is you want to do. So I think that card is a key part of the deck. Otherwise, you have to kind of take lines where you search up Deranged Hermit and just hope to cast it and that it's good enough, and sometimes that's not. So I think the Poacher is probably locked, but then it's the last two cards, the Collar of the Claw and the Thornscape Battle Mage, where I could definitely see not playing either of those. I'm not sure what you would play instead, so that's TBD. You can play more Nantuko Vigilantes because that card always seems to be doing something. In a way, Nantuko Vigilante I think is kind of like the Withered Wretch of this deck. Like it just always seems to do something, and when it doesn't, it's fine.
Well, if that's true, then you should play four of them.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm just kidding, but maybe. Yeah, I like the idea of the poacher. I like that it can be a threat if you don't have survival. Like you could just draw it. Like, so tell me if this is the accurate way to think about the Elves deck. It's like driven by two engines, assuming you have a bunch of mana, which you usually will. So take that as a background assumption. You can one engine is survival, and just like going nuts with survival, and the other is Wirewood Multani's Acolyte.
Yeah,
to like basically draw into your other stuff.
That's kind of the way to think about it, but the Multani Acolyte Wirewood doesn't come up as much because generally if you have that much mana, there's maybe something better to do, like maybe you've drawn Deranged Hermit or Masticore or something.
Yeah, but isn't the Acolyte what draws you into those cards?
The Acolyte can definitely get you there, and the strength I think of Acolyte and Wirewood Symbiote is kind of twofold. One, it's like it gets you cards every turn, but you don't even need a ton of mana for that. Like you can just play a Wirewood into Acolyte, and if they don't have like a trampling creature, you get to fog it every turn and draw cards and kind of bounce your Acolyte after you block. And so you get to move ahead with your game while they don't really do anything. So I think that's a big strength there. And just you don't need a ton of mana for that. And if they start killing your symbiote, it's like, okay, well now you're up 3 cards in the exchange eventually, and you can pay the Echo and trade for whatever it is. I think Multani's Acolyte is one of the better cards against like the Sly deck because you can play it and they can kill it, or they can't attack. So if they have any creature they want to attack with, they can't really do that till they kill it. So sometimes it gets you in trouble where you have to pay the Echo and then they kill it and then they get you, but. That's why I kind of like having these extra lands, so you're never missing your land drops or setting yourself too far back when you pay the Multani's Acolyte Echo.
Yeah, maybe when I said my assumption is you have a bunch of mana, I just meant like you're in general going to have sufficient mana in this deck usually because it's all elves and like stuff like that. So assuming those are kind of like the two key engines, I like the idea of having Skyshroud Poacher as another card that can like jumpstart one of those. I mean, you wouldn't really get Multani's Acolyte with it, but it's just like another good card that kind of like modularly fits in with either of the other two plans, and then you can go get Deranged Hermit or whatever. So I'm on board with that. The Collar of the Claw, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good card sometimes. Maybe it would be better as a Ranger or Vigilante or...
Yeah, the Collar of the Claw, I kind of put it main deck is like you said, there's a lot of trending cards playing like Volcanic Spray, right? Like, so it's like, oh, maybe I want this card main deck, and it's why like the 2 ports main deck as well. It's like I can take them off of red mana, or I can have the Collar main deck, maybe steal a game that way. I played some playtest games against SWB, Stephen Y. Bush, in Manhattan a couple weeks ago, and he was playing his Parfait.
Oh yeah.
With
I keep forgetting you're over on the East Coast.
Yeah, I don't get into the city much, but when I do, I try and play some Magic. But he was playing his Parfait list with Oath instead of Terravores, he's got Shard Phoenix and Ancestors Chosen. And I actually won a game 1 where he oathed into both of them because I was able to Collar of the Claw for, I think, 5 bears after he Shard Phoenixed, and then use the Tribal Force Mage twice in a turn to do enough damage to go through all the life he'd gained from the Ancestors Chosen. So like, it gives you some outs there. I don't know how important that is. It's probably, I thought it was important enough to play it here, but it could be anything else really.
I like the idea of having a card that's good against a main deck spray or a sweeper or something like that. Makes sense.
And then
all right,
Escape, the last card, which like I said, it hasn't been as impressive as it was in middle school that first time I played it, and like every match was coming down to me locking the game up with Battle Mage twice a turn with Symbiote and 2 red sources where like nobody could stick anything in play. So I like having a second way to remove a creature. It could be a second Masticore. Masticore is very good. But I've always liked it as an answer for Meddling Mage, like that, they're not going to name that. They have to name Survival, they have to name Masticore, and then they have to name Deranged Tournament after that. So it's really hard for them to be like, oh, I need to name Thornscape Battle Mage with my Meddling Mage. I don't think that's ever really feasible. I know we played some of those games for LobsterCon. Did you ever name Thornscape with Meddling Mage?
I don't remember, but I think eventually I learned I just had to name Survival, and then I stopped playing the deck after that.
Yeah. So I guess it's fine. It could be Masticore, it could be Third Hermit, it could be, Birchlord Rangers or something. Though I wouldn't play Birchlords without Thornscape in the deck. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the 4th Ranger. Or the Kamal. The Kamal's a consideration for main deck because there are matchups where Kamal is more important than having Tribal Force Mage because you might need to do a lot more type of board presence. Like giving your guys +2/+2 might not be enough against an army of like 3 Terrorboars or something, or whatever. Or specifically in the mirror, if you both have a lot of creatures in play, Tribal Force Mage pumps both sides, so it's hard to get an edge. When I played the Phantom Nantuko, I used it on Insect a lot with Wirewood Symbiote and Nantuko Vigilante and Phantom Nantuko, so it's good to remember that it doesn't have to name Elf. But Kamal lets you just pump everything bigger than what they can do, and you should usually win with Kamal. So I do think Kamal has some merits.
I have a question about that. So in the mirror, that's like you're talking about if you like naturally draw it, right? Because if you have just a bunch of mana and Survival, then it's like first to Masticore away the other player's creatures wins, right?
Sometimes the Masticore can get destroyed or otherwise taken out, or maybe you're in a spot where they're about to play Masticore. If Tribal Force Mage was Kamal, you could win that turn, versus you might not have enough to kill all of their guys. The mirror is weird. It's really more about who has Priest of Titania, since that also counts both sides. So you might have enough mana for a Tribal Force Mage win, but you're not going to have enough for Masticore, where they do, because they have Priest, and they get to tap for all your stuff.
Okay.
I haven't played the mirror a lot. I think I've lost it both times I played it online.
But how could you have enough mana to win with Kamal, but not to like kill all their stuff with Masticore?
So that's like you have 11 mana, right? So 6 + 5 is 11. So that's 4 + 7. You can only do like 3 damage with Masticore at that point. 3 damage might be enough. It might not be enough, especially if they have a Wirewood Symbiote and Anger in the graveyard. It might be where like next turn you might kill stuff this turn, but next turn they're going to go crazy. So it's like if you have like Goblin Sharpshooter, like you should be able to win from there. But Masticore is tricky. Masticore is much better when you like don't have to search it up. You just naturally draw it. So I think one of the times I lost the mirror, my opponent was just playing 4 Deranged Tournament, 4 Masticore in his main deck, and I was like, oh, okay, that he's ready to win.
Oh yeah, I saw that build. Yeah.
So
that looks pretty sweet.
That's actually like a legit way to beat the mirror. Just have more Masticores. So yeah, I like the Thornscape Battle Mage enough that I'll probably play the same main deck. The thing with the sideboard that I probably want to talk about here is these Sylvan Libraries. I
wanted to ask about those too.
It was my first time playing Sylvan Library in the sideboard. I boarded them a couple times. I only really drew them twice, and one time it won me the game because I kept a hand with turn 2 Library and some mana. He on the play, and he duressed me on his turn 1. No, he therapy turn 1 and named Survival, and I had Sylvan, so I played turn 2 Sylvan and won the game from there. And the other one, it was kind of neutral, so I don't know what other card it could be. It could be could be like Call of the Herd. It could be more Antuco Vigilantes. It could be more Masticores. It could be something along those lines. It could be some type of graveyard hate. I beat.
But what is the function? Like, what are you trying to do with this Sylvan library? You're trying to play a longer, more grindy game against. Is that against like everybody or only certain
not
matchups?
but against the decks that like a lot of these decks that like we talked about with all the hate cards, right? Like I think Sylvan's really good there at letting you set up your draws to find the answers to the right hate cards at the right time. So like if you draw naturalize, you can naturalize their thing. But if you see naturalize and they don't have engineer plague in play, it's like okay, well maybe I can shuffle that away, or I can try and find my Nantuko Vigilante or my Utabi Orangutan, or whatever it is you're looking for. I think it's better at finding those sideboard cards, and it's also in the right matchups more card advantage. You just pay 8 life, and that's a good way to kind of make up for whatever card advantage you're down by getting like losing your board to a sweeper or an engineering plague or something like that.
So yeah, I guess the question is that the best card for that role, or would you want like a combination? Like I don't know, 3 seems like a lot.
3's a lot. I think I boarded in 3 only once. I think I boarded in 2 a lot of the time. So
yeah, maybe you should cut one.
I could definitely cut one, but like I do have, and the Wirewood Herald in the sideboard I think is probably too cute by half. We should probably talk about that because that's the way to get Caller of the Claw while you have Skyshroud Poacher active. So if you have Poacher active with 6 mana and they play a sweeper, you can go search up Wirewood Herald, float 3 mana, let Wirewood Herald die with all your rest of your guys, go search up Caller of the Claw, cast Caller of the Claw. Whereas you can't really do that otherwise, but I never have come across that situation, so I don't know if that's worth the spot. It is also the only way to do Caller of the Claw against Balancing Act, so it's there.
Yeah, okay.
So basically there's like 4 spots in the board that I'm willing to change to anything. That's the 3 Sylvans and the 1 Wirewood Herald. So like they could be Call of the Herds, so I don't think I would want all of the Call of the Herds.
Would you ever want to board into Tanglewire, or is that not worth it?
I guess Tanglewire could be good because let's see, like I just played against in the last round of the Fall Brawl, I played against Full English Breakfast, and I got pretty lucky to win the match. Like game 1, he mulliganed to 5 and just kind of kept an all mana hand and never found any gas. And then game 2, he crushed me on turn 2 basically, or whatever. And game 3, I was on the play. I had a very good draw, and even though he duressed my survival, by turn 3, I had a Deranged Hermit in play, and then I had the red mana for my Thornscape Battle Mage to kill his Hermit Druid that he survivaled up. So, like, a lot had to go right for me to win that 3rd game, and it did, but like Tanglewire would have more than enough won that game if I just had that instead of that Thornscape Battle Mage or whatever. Which, not saying I would have had it there, but it's a card that I would have liked to have had.
Yeah, just like based on what you're telling me about it before, that there are some matchups where it's just really, really good, and you have these. If you
play is Biorhythm in the sideboard, I think it's. I don't like Biorhythm. I think it's impossible to get to 8 mana. As much mana as this deck has, I think it's impossible to get to 8 mana on a turn where you actually want to cast Biorhythm. Like the turn 3 Biorhythm is such a pipe dream, and turn 4 I think is usually too slow against the decks that I wanted against, or they have counter spells up by then. So I think Tanglewire is a lot better there, though I do think Tanglewire and Biorhythm go pretty well together in that the Tanglewire buys you the time you need to get to Biorhythm set up, but I don't know if I'm willing to play like 4 Tanglewire, 2 Biorhythm in my sideboard or something.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't.
The other Biorhythm is the crop rotation to like go Cradle into Cradle or play, always have Cradle, which, yeah, Cradle is a good way to get to 8 mana, but, if you have Cradle going, I think you should just win.
I don't like the direction this is going. biorhythm combo with
Yeah.
more crop rotations. No, thank you. Um, yeah, so you could play Tangle Wire, Call of the Herd. How have you found Call of the Herd to be?
I
How
like
does
Call of
that
the
work as a strategy?
I liked Call of the Herd quite a bit when I played it at LobsterCon, because I was like leaning on it to be my card against Sly and Goblins, and against Engineer Plague as well, where like, oh, they play Plague, I just make a 3/3 and I flash it back, and it's really hard for them to beat that. The problem is it's like, it's a little weak against Powder Keg. Obviously, Perish is whatever. And then I found that like, maybe it's just the matches I've played, I've gotten lucky in them, but I actually haven't lost to Burn, Sly, or Goblins as much as I thought I was going to with this deck. I think this deck, that's when I really started to think, hey, this deck has to be a top 3 deck, is because the 2 decks I thought were some of its worst matchups aren't actually that bad. Like game 1 against Goblins, I think is probably slightly in your favor, especially if you win the die roll. So even on the draw, their best draw is turn 1 Lackey and then Jim Palm your blocker and put in something that's going to go find a sharpshooter. You can't beat that, but your best draws can beat a turn 3 sharpshooter because it's really hard for that turn 3 sharpshooter to have haste. So I think Goblins is not nearly as bad matchup as I thought it was, and I think Burn, it's really hard for them to play it because they have to try and kill all of your creatures, and sometimes that means you aren't taking any damage. So the Jackal Pup draws are pretty hard to beat, but the ones where it's just like Grim Lawmancer or Mog Fanatic, like you can kind of grind that out with survival if they kind of flood out a little bit. That's where I'm like, I don't need Call of the Herd as much. In fact, Nantuko Vigilante is kind of almost as good in some of those matchups. It's not great.
Just because you're killing something with it, or
yeah, you'll kill something with it, or against Engineer Plague, like you can just play Morph, right? Like I said before, like you just play more ways to kill Plague. There are also creatures that can attack on their own. So, yeah, I don't know. Call of the Herd, not high on the list of cards I want to play, and I've played Wall of Blossoms before for those 2 matchups, and I think that card is much worse than Call of the Herd because it just doesn't attack.
Yeah.
The only advantage it has is that it's a creature that you can discard to survival. So, so maybe
yeah, it doesn't sound too exciting.
I can play Phantom Nantukos in the sideboard too. That might be a cool thing.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't have any like very exciting, spicy elf technology off the top of my head. You're playing a lot of the one of cards or like specialty creatures for the most part already.
They all have a point to play, and like I only have so much room because I'm going to play so many lands that really it's kind of tight on space. And against other people play a lot of stuff because they play 4 or fewer lands in their main deck, so they can play. They might just cut 4 lands for 4 Tangle Wires and call it a day. Be like, okay, well I'm not doing that. That's not for me. So.
Yeah, I don't know. These are decks that I always have trouble. This is the kind of deck I have trouble sideboarding with because I never know how much of my engine to remove for cards to mitigate what my opponent might be doing. So this is not my forte. In fact, do you wanna like discuss that a little bit? How do you know?
What I think and what I found is that actually your engine in this deck, like he's like, oh well, you need all this mana to set up your survival. It's actually you don't after sideboard. You can use your survival to find your mana first and then go. So like your engine's a little slower, but generally what I'm sideboarding out is like probably 2 Quirion Rangers because you might not need you only need kind of 1 to go off, and maybe 2 Priest of Titanias, and then 1 of each Llanowar Elves and Fyndhorn Elves. So like you're kind of cutting like what is that 6 of your elves,
6 cards, yeah.
And from there you're going to bring in stuff that goes a little bit later. So almost always bringing in the Genesis after board just because games go long and you actually kind of want to rebuy some of these cards, especially once you go down to just one Korean Ranger. And the Genesis is good. Then you bring in like your Nantuko Vigilantes, the two of those. The Utabi Orangutan comes in quite a bit because people like to bring in Phyrexian Furnace, and it's such a good card there. Just like you kill a Furnace, you didn't have to waste a turn, get your squee removed. You just go kill the Furnace, and then they're behind, and then Naturalize if you need it. Like at this point, I'm only bringing Naturalize to beat cards like Oath of Druids or Phyrexian Dreadnought. I don't bring it in to beat Engineer Plague because I have those 2 Vigilantes in the sideboard and the 1 in the main. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said. Like that's where I'm at on the Engineer.
Do you think that's typical, or is that kind of like a unique?
I have no
choice.
idea how people do this. This is just what I've been doing. I see other people in the Elves Discord talk about their builds, but I don't see a lot of sideboarding advice. And I've asked some questions before on some of these hands, whether I should keep or mull. And I think we have very different opinions on how to play this deck, at least from what
How do those keep or mulligan decisions differ in general? Are you keeping more hands than other people, or
I think
mulliganing more?
Where I'm willing to. There's hands in like bad matchups. I think it was specifically the one where I was like, it's a bad matchup. I'm keeping a hand on the draw that just has Cradle as my mana, because if I draw a Forest, I might actually have a chance. And people are like, oh, you can't keep this hand because you can't cast any spells. And it's like, well, I can mulligan to 4 and have a hand that casts spells and loses every time. Or I can keep this 5-carder that if I draw a Forest, I can play.
So you were already on 5.
Yeah, I was either on 5 or 6. And
okay, yeah.
And it's like, I think, obviously on 7, I'm not going to keep a Cradle only.
Right.
So,
what was the matchup that was so bad?
I think it was in the finals of that league against the Iggy Pop deck. Right. Like no chance of winning at all. But, yeah. I think the hand in particular was a hand where I had... I can maybe find it, but it was something like I had the Cradle, I had a Wall of Roots, I had a Llanowar Elf, and I had a Plow Under, and so Llanowar Elf, Wall of Roots, Cradle, Plow Under, and I think a Survival or something, and 2 other cards, but it's like, oh, I can keep that, and if I draw a Forest, I have a turn 3 Plow Under with Survival in play, and maybe that's enough. On a 5-card hand in one of the worst matchups, and I kept it. I didn't draw a land. I died, but I don't think going to 4 was going to necessarily be better. So I don't know.
But you're off Plow Under now. That's not a card you were talking about.
I tried 3 in the sideboard, kind of in that Biorhythm spot, and it was never good enough.
It seems like Tangawire is probably like a better version of.
You can play a deck with both, but I think Plow Under is just not quite good enough. As cool as it is, and I think he even played one Stunted Growth, and I don't know.
I was just about to mention Stunted Growth.
I'm a big Stunted Growth fan. I don't know if it's playable. So
it's a cool card. Might not quite be up to par.
People have been playing in the sideboard, in these kind of more Cradle control decks. Is they play like Pyroclasm, or some way to have a sweeper for the mirror or for goblins. Basically it's you got to kill the war chief, and I don't hate the idea of playing something maybe another changing the Rashad imports to Harplucin Forests and putting in a couple Pyroclasms in the sideboard. I don't think it's necessary, but it's an option to think about. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It seems pretty counterintuitive to play Pyroclasm in a deck with all these creatures that die to it. I guess you can work it out so that maybe that's not a problem, but it seems like it would be.
If they have Sharpshooter in play, you don't have a board anyway. So,
So why not play another Sharpshooter of your own or something like that?
I think it's.
I guess you
get haste, and it gets a little weird. Because they have 2 toughness guys as well. You shoot their Sharpshooter, they shoot yours, and you don't get anywhere. I mean, you kill it. It's why I like Thornscape in that spot, but sometimes, they still have the War Chief in play that's going to kill you the next turn.
It just seems it just seems so awkward with all the rest of your cards that I would want to avoid it if at all possible. But maybe it's not possible, but
Yeah, I think that's
I don't know. Have you tried
not possible. And I'm sympathetic to that. I've played Blood Moon in my Tron sideboards before. Like sometimes you just have to play the card that beats the matchup you want to beat. It's not as bad for you as it is for them. So I'm not opposed to it, but I don't think I'm going to go that route.
Yeah, I'm pretty opposed to it on theoretical grounds, but I just feel like there has to be another way. But maybe there's not another way. But this kind of conflicts with what I feel like you were saying earlier, which is like, okay, here's the logic. Tell me if this is wrong. But like you were saying, the Goblins matchup is not as bad as you thought.
I would say it's not as bad as I thought, but then like it does get much worse after sideboard because they have Crisis in that card, or they have Plagues and Perishes, or they have a lot of really strong cards, and if they have any of those cards with like a Goblin Lackey and a Goblin Matron, it's really hard to win. But so I think it's probably a bad matchup overall. I think the people I played against probably don't realize that you actually have to mulligan to have those good draws against Elves, or you're gonna still lose. You can't just play normal game and hope to draw your sideboard cards. You kind of like have to be aggressive about it. So against good players, maybe it's much worse.
So like, how are you configuring your deck such that Pyroclasm isn't bad for you? Like, what do you need more? Like, would you need Call of the Herd to go along with that? Probably.
You might want Call of the Herd. I think I could see a situation where you have like, so in general, like in these burn matchups and God matchups, you're taking out like all but one Priest of Titania, all but one Korean Ranger, because they just don't do anything, and you leave in all of your normal mana creatures. So you're already cutting down on some stuff, and you have Wirewood Symbiote that can kind of like put stuff back in your hand if you're about to Pyroclasm. It's not the end of the world. And a lot of times you play a guy, they kill it. You play another guy, they kill it, and then it's like, okay, well, now I can Pyroclasm you. Right.
Interesting. So, but okay. So have you tried this, or are you saying you're not going to play?
This is kind of me thinking about it right now. Is like, would I want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to, but if it actually works, then I guess go for it. I don't know. I haven't played very much Elves or Goblins, let alone the 1v1 matchup between them. But
all right, well, I think that's good food for thought. I don't have much more to say here. So
nice, yeah. Keep wrecking people with Elves until they can stop you. Oh, should we talk about what we think the top decks are? Or did you already do that?
Oh yeah, let's talk about it, because I said I think the three best decks in some order are Elves, Dreadnought of some type, and then some deck that plays Parallax Wave and Opalescence. Whether that's Replenish or the Enchantress deck, I don't know, but I think it's one of the something like that, because that combo is so strong against a lot of the stuff in the field. What do you think the three best decks in Premodern are? Or do you think it's more than three?
I know we're pretty much on the same page. When you said three, I was thinking like, oh, is he leaving out Replenish or is he leaving out Enchantress? But you're kind of like grouping them as into one category. Yeah, so it's really more like four then, if we're being fair.
Yeah, but there's so many flavors.
Because I think
and like the Dreadnought kind of covers some of the Parallax Tide shenanigans that like I don't want to get into. Like, okay, is it mono blue Tide? Is it mono blue Dreadnought? Is it blue white Dreadnought? Is it blue white Tide? Like they kind of start blending together too, but clearly.
Well, I don't know. I feel like Dreadnought's more the different flavors of Dreadnought are more similar than Replenish is with Enchantress. Even though
I think the other way around.
Yeah.
I think the different levels of Dreadnought are so much more different than like both the Replenish and Enchantress these days are just trying to put that combo into play as soon as possible against most decks, and then how they supplement that with card advantage is different. Yeah. We can agree to this.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is not wrong, but I feel like they play out fairly differently in terms of just like how their games go against other decks. Like Enchantress is all about drawing a bunch of cards, whereas Replenish is more about like finding the right cards.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
the Enchantress deck, it's harder to interact with their card draw, but at the same time, they have less of their own interaction and less. I don't know, though. I mean, I think the Enchantress deck is clearly superior if I had to pick between them, but.
superior to Replenish?
Yes, yes.
Interesting. I mean, I haven't played either one of them that much, but my instinct would have been the opposite. But yeah, I mean, they're both obviously very, very good. I would have them both in the top tier, and I would have, Stifle Not, all flavors grouped together, and I wouldn't have been inclined to put Elves in the top spot just because I feel like, aside from knowing what your record is, I haven't seen it.
Right.
It doesn't seem to have the performances that those other decks have, and I don't know if that's just because people aren't building it the right way or playing it.
I don't know.
They're
That's
too
kind of
vulnerable.
I thought about it going into LobsterCon this year was like, oh, I'm playing Elves. I don't think it's quite in the top tier because there's so many cards that like I don't want to play against. Like you don't play against Oath of Druids, you don't really want to play against Parallax Wave, and you didn't really want to play against Goblins or Burn. But now that I've played enough of it, it's like, oh, actually, I'm not afraid of a lot of that stuff. Like, is beatable. Like, Oath of Druids for Terravore is easily beatable. So I think that kind of changed my perspective of it, and I just win so much. It's like, okay, I think Elves might actually be in the top tier now, where before I would have probably been in your shoes. Like, it's in that tier below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but otherwise, I'm pretty much in agreement with you. Like, it's those decks, and then everything else is on the next level. Oath. Should we talk? I don't know. How much do we want to get into all the rest of the decks? Probably that might be too much.
I would say, we're probably both coming from slightly less informed on anything else in this format, and there's other podcasts you can listen to if you want to get into Dreadnought, Mirror Leveling Wars, or Parallax Tide shenanigans. I don't find that to be that interesting. I found like sometimes I listen to people talk about how they imagine these pre-modern games to go, and I just like that's never been my experience at all. Like my experience with pre-modern is like people die way quicker than these like long drawn out games where it's like, oh, you gotta have the second flash of insight to break the mirrors. Like I don't see that, but that's my experience. So we'll let the experts handle those decks. We'll talk about what we know, which is Moneyball Black and Elves. Monocolor decks.
That's right.
All right, well, I think that wraps up. Anything else you want to talk about? Magic related? Let me know. We can come back on in the future, talk about Premodern, talk about something else.
Yeah, I just got some cards for to test Vintage for this thing I'm going to. So at some point I got to talk to you about Vintage because I have no clue what's going on there.
How you really know about that? But I was pretty plugged in about a year ago, and it doesn't change much, but it changes enough that you gotta like figure out why.
Yeah. Well, I haven't played it like really at all, so trying to figure that out. But no, that's probably that's all I got on Premodern at the moment.
All right. Well, thanks for being my first guest on the Fool's Tone podcast, and just a reminder to listeners, check out Grantfly on YouTube. Watch all of his Premodern leagues. He's very entertaining. There's some pretty hilarious situations in some of those games where I'm just stunned that your decks are winning or working, or that your opponents are doing something that they're like, oh wow, this is quite a new interaction because the cards you play are not standard. Yeah.
There was one like that between Illurin and Goblin Bombardment and Welkenhawk in this last match. So there's a teaser.
I was like, oh, I already know. You just stick a bombardment, and they're like, they're just in such a spot. Like, how can they ever go off?
I did not really anticipate it until it happened, and then I was like, oh, okay.
All right. Well, thanks again, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Talk to you later, sir.
Okay, so that was my first interview for my first podcast. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any suggestions, I know the audio might be a little wonky. I'll try and improve that going forward. I'm learning this as I go, but really wanted to just kind of dive in and learn along the way. So if you have any topics that you want me to discuss or guests you want me to interview, reach out. You can find me on social media. I'm sure you know how to find me. And if you don't, ask somebody. Anyway, that's all I got. Till next time. Bye.